Holy cow, it's a stack of Game Boy Advance games. Actually, it's not just any stack of Game Boy Advance games. This is my collection of Game Boy Advance games that I've collected over the years, and I'm still collecting them apparently. Whether it be actual cartridges or downloading them on my Wii Homebrew channel, which I'm not going to go over that in this video, because that's another video for another time. But, hi everyone, RicoRock2001 here. The reason why I have my stack of Game Boy Advance games is because today we're going to take a look at a peripheral that you can use on a Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, or any clone system that has a Super Nintendo cartridge slot. Now before I get to the devices that I want to share with you in the video, let me show you one device, although yours may vary on what part of the country you're in. This is a Super Game Boy. This is actually the Japanese design of the Super Game Boy. It may look similar to the European one, but I have the Japanese one because I have a Super Famicom. I did have the North American one, but that belongs to my friend Phase Doom Guy. Maybe I'll have him feature it in another video, but this is what a Super Game Boy looks like, at least the Japanese and European one. The North American one looks a lot like a taller Super Nintendo cartridge. This allowed you to play Game Boy games on your television, and the black cartridges as well, and some Pokemon cartridges. If you stick that in your television, it will boot up, and sometimes it'll have its own background screen and utilize some colors if you ever so choose to use that. There's also a Super Game Boy 2, which I don't have. It looks like this, but it's clear green. I want to get my hands on a Super Game Boy 2, so if anyone can find one for a good deal, then I may pick it up. Next we have is the Game Boy player from the Nintendo GameCube. This device allows you stick this underneath your GameCube. It allows you to play original Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games, but there's more than that. There's a link cable in the front here. This allows you to utilize not only the link cable, but it also works with that wireless adapter that comes with Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. I still have the receiver, but I don't have the, unfortunately I don't have the game because I got stolen years ago. I'll eventually replace it, so don't worry about that. If anyone can find a good deal for that, a real copy. I don't want those fake bootleg ones, I should mention. But let's say you want to play Game Boy Advance games, but you don't want to use the GameCube controller because, well, let me grab the GameCube controller. Just bear with me for a moment. But let's say you don't want to use a GameCube controller. In fact, if I could find one right here. So, this will do. I'll use my good old Wavebird. Because everyone loves the Wavebird. But you don't like how the controls are, which defeats the purpose because the Wavebird's one of the best GameCube controllers. But you don't like using the thumbstick or the placement of the D-pad or how the A and B buttons are, and you don't like how Y and X act as the select button or stuff like that. One nice thing I like about the Wavebird is, well, it's wireless, but that's a different. I've done a review on that. If you want to check a review on that, please check out one of my other videos on my channel, or I'll put a link in the description. But now let's talk about the main focus of the video. Let's say you want to use a Super Nintendo controller. Also, I forgot to mention there's that expensive Hori controller for the GameCube, but you don't want to spend an arm and a leg for that. Or you don't want to use a Game Boy Advance link cable, which does work, by the way, but you utilize a lot of hours and you don't want the batteries to die, or the rechargeable battery to die. So, other than that, now let's focus on the main review. Sorry I've been blabbering, but I thought I'd show you the other peripherals that Nintendo made. Here's one made by Retrobit. It's the Super Retro Advance Adapter by Retrobit. There's also other names. Basically, there are other variations that have a different label on it, but it does the same thing. It allows you to play your Game Boy Advance games on a Super Nintendo, a PAL Super Nintendo, a Super Famicom, or any clone system that has a Super Nintendo cartridge slot. If you want to play Game Boy Advance games with this adapter, this will allow you to play it on your television. There's more to that. I need to mention a few things. Number one, it only works with Game Boy Advance games, so if you're expecting a Game Boy Color TV adapter, this is not the one for you. You'll actually have to use the Game Boy player or modify your own Game Boy adapter. I wish they would make a Retro Color 64 for the N64. I would so buy that. So Retrobit, if you're watching this, I know you don't make these anymore, which really stinks because these things are awesome. You need to make a color adapter for 64. Because there are some people who want to play Game Boy Color games on their television without using the Game Boy player, if anyone understands. But back on topic. Another thing is, if you were to hook this into a Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, or any system that's not Retrobit, let's say it's not the Super Retro Trio, you will need to use the AV out on this thing because this is just a cartridge that takes power from it. To get video out of here, you need to use the cables that come with it. In fact, I'll show them in a moment. Here are the cables that you use. This plugs into the cartridge, like so, and this is your composite to your television. The picture's not that bad. It actually does a job very well. Also, just like the Game Boy player and the Super Game Boy 2, this also has an extension port, which is very convenient. Let's say if you want to play a game that utilizes the link cable, that allows you to do that. I'll go ahead and demonstrate what it looks like with a cartridge inside. I'll probably grab this one right here. Super Mario World 2 Super Mario World Super Mario Advance 2. Sorry about that. You stick this in your console. The reason why I picked this game is because obviously it's Super Mario World is a launch title for the Super Nintendo, but I grew up playing with the Game Boy Advance version. I was born in '95, cut me some slack. I didn't play the original Super Nintendo version until 2012. I found it at a retro store, which closed down sadly. Well, the Super Nintendo version, for those who are wondering. Here's what you do. You take this, stick it in your console, and you take the AV out and hook it up to your television. I'm going to skip the hookup part and just do a jump cut and show you what it looks like with it in the console. So go ahead and bear with me for a moment. I got it hooked up to my Super Famicom right now. I prefer that compared to the North American Super Nintendo. I've done a disassembly video on this system. I got a Super Famicom controller hooked up to it through an extension cable because the Super Famicom controller only has like a 3-foot cable. Anyway, I really love the color design and the way the face buttons feel. Although most people are going to prefer the North American design because the Y and X are concave and the B and A are convex, just like the Y and X are concave like a NES rectangular controller, the original classic design, while the B and A are convex, just like a Game Boy or the Dogbone controller. It really doesn't matter to me. I mean, the concave is a nice touch, but it really doesn't matter to me, to be honest. So it's really preference. Another thing I forgot to mention, the back of the cartridge has the slits just like a North American system, so you don't need to actually modify your system, or you actually don't need to have the adapter to play your games on it. That's one thing I gotta say I love about the Super Retro Advance adapter. So I'm going to go ahead and break this into part 2 and demonstrate it in action, so stay tuned for that. This is Rika Rockstyles 1 saying, stay tuned for part 2, where I'm going to demonstrate with not only Super Mario World, Super Mario Advance 2, but a few other games as well. So stay tuned for that.